Kyle Agre with Brewer-Agre Outdoors. Today we're going to be assembling the Eskimo FlipMo2 Inferno flip-over style shelter. And this is their premier shelter, designed with two anglers in mind, fully insulated and big enough and plenty of room for all the gear and equipment, heaters, electronics that you might have out on the ice. So we're going to take you through the process from out of the box to fully assembled, and we're going to do that kind of step by step, giving you some tips and ideas on how to make that process a little bit easier, a little bit quicker, and get you out on the ice that much faster. I'm going to be building the Eskimo FlipMo2 Inferno on top of the Lake Runner utility hauler. This is going to give me several advantages as I'm out over some rough conditions, rough ice, deep snow, conditions that are going to put a lot of stress on a normal flip-over style plastic tub. The all-steel construction in the Lake Runner can handle that abuse. Not to mention the fact that when it's in the transport position, it's actually lifting your gear and hauling it a good 6 inches up off of the terrain. So right now we have it in the down or the fishing position, which when we have our shelter built on top of it, this is a position we will use when we're fishing and stationary. But once we fold that shelter up, we want to head on down the lake, simply lifting it up, attaching it to our snowmobile or ATV, and away we go. The first thing you're going to want to do as you unpack all of the components out of the box is to make sure that you have everything needed to assemble your shelter. Now there is a checklist, a parts list in the owner's manual. Go ahead and use that as your check-off sheet and go through each piece one by one, making sure you have everything that you need. I like to use an old tackle tray or maybe an extra tackle tray I have sitting around and use that to separate and organize all the nuts, bolts, screws, and small pieces that come with this assembly kit. This isn't an overly difficult assembly, but it is complex in the sense that there are quite a few small pieces, and it's crucial that we know exactly what we have and use those bolts, nuts in the right place in the assembly process. Having that little tray compartment there makes it so much easier. It also makes it easier if you have to do this in a number of different settings and you have a break in between, so you can keep track of where everything is at and what you still have to use. As far as tools are concerned, as I mentioned, this isn't an overly difficult assembly, and so some basic tools are going to come in real handy and basically be all that we need to assemble this fishing shelter. A socket kit is good. A few wrenches, maybe a screwdriver. This is really all we're going to need to put this shelter together. As we're ready to get started, take a moment to review the instructions in the manual. I know I'm just like any of the rest of us, and sometimes we don't take the time to read these instructions. You know, we think we can jump right in and figure it out on our own. You know what? They give you the instructions for a reason. Go ahead and at least skim through them, knowing which order the components are put together. It comes in real handy and it's a big help. And in the long run, it's actually going to save you some time. So go ahead and become familiar with the process, and then we'll go ahead and get started and start assembling our pieces. The first step in our assembly process is to mount the base plate, the riser, and the bracket that will be used to hold our pole assembly. And basically you have three pieces to work with here. You've got your base plate, which sits right on the corner of the tub. You have a riser, and you have a little bracket here that gives it some extra stability. The bolts, when you put them on, are going to go through sometimes one, sometimes two different pieces. The toughest part of the whole process is just getting that little nut up underneath the lip of the sled. Take your time, you'll get it, and make sure all of those nuts and bolts are secure. This is going to carry the bulk of the weight with the pole assembly. So we want to make sure we have this on right. There, now that we have our base plate, our bracket, and our riser mounted securely, it's time to move on to the pole assembly. The pole assemblies are pre-assembled and come this way in the box. The most difficult thing with them is just figuring out which side is which. And the easiest way I can describe that is if you look at the bottom, the solid piece on the assembly. This is which the side which bolts to our riser. Now, once we have use that as your orientation. And I always look at it, the vertical face of the triangle should be facing to the outside of the tub. And then the curved piece of tubing should be on the inside, facing the inside of the tub. Once we have that figured out, it's easy. 2 bolts each, and they go right on, and we're ready to move on to the next step. There we have it. Our pole assemblies are firmly attached to our tub, and we're ready to move on to our seat assembly. The next step that we're doing here in our assembly process is we are adding the braces, support braces for our seats. They're actually 2 bars that run the entire length of the tub. We're going to mount our seat bases and our tables to these 2 bars. So they're going to be our main primary source of support. What we actually will do is pull out 2 of the bolts that we use to mount our bracket and our risers, and we will add the seat supports and replace the bolt and the nuts and tighten them up again. Not a difficult process, takes a few minutes to make sure everything is lined up properly, and then we can move on. Next, we're going to add our support brackets inside of the tub to help hold up our seat rails. And basically, these are U-shaped pieces of metal, and we're going to follow the instructions in the manual, and we're going to attach 3 of them to the rear rail and 1 of them to the middle of the front rail, and attach those with 2.5-inch bolts, nuts, and washers. Once we've finished with the brackets and the supports for the seats, the next thing is to mount the seats on the rails. So let's take a look at what we've got for parts and get our plan together for getting those put together. We are ready to start adding our seats and mounting them to the sled and to our shelter. What we're going to do here is we're going to flip that seat upside down. We're going to just lay it right here, and you'll see there's 4 holes where we're going to bolt the swivel base to that seat. Once we finish that process, we'll mount it to the actual mounting bars themselves on the shelter. Just give the swivel base a 45-degree turn. That's going to allow us to have easy access to the mounting holes. Go ahead and line those up, and what we will do is we'll secure them to the seat with 1.5-inch bolts, washers, and nuts. Okay. We have secured our swivel base to the seat. Now we're going to go ahead and flip it over and attach it to the mounting brackets. There we go. We've got 1 seat mounted. Swivels just like we want it. Nice and firm. We're going to go ahead and mount the other seat. Then we'll move on to the tables, and finally put on the shell, and we'll be ready to go. The FlipMo2 Inferno comes with 3 tables for storing tackle, food, whatever you might have while you're using the house and while you're fishing. And there's 2 small tables which go on the outsides, and 1 larger table which goes right between the 2 swivel seats. What is neat about this is they actually have countersunk nuts threaded nuts in the table, in the wood itself. So basically you just have to line up the holes and attach them from the bottom of the brackets with 1.25-inch bolts and washers. One of the things that I would recommend as you go about putting this together is that the directions say to use 1.5-inch bolt to connect the seat to the swivel bracket. And then it asks for 1.25-inch to attach the table to the seat bracket. And what I would recommend do is flipping those 2 around. I would use the 1.25-inch to attach the seats to the swivel bracket, and I would use the 1.5-inch to attach the table to the runners that the seats are mounted on. And really the purpose of that is the 1.25-inch is more than enough to attach the seats to the swivel bracket. And a little bit more thread is a lot of help when you're attaching the tables to the runners, to the runner bars. And so that little trick, just in terms of being prepared for it, that's going to save you a little time and maybe make things a little bit easier for you. Now that we have our chairs and our tables installed, basically all the hardware is in place. What we're going to do here is our final step before we add the fabric skin. We're going to take our aluminum poles here and we're going to connect our two pole assembly hubs and basically just slide these onto each ends of the poles and slide them on down. You will notice there's one set of poles that's a little bit narrower than the others. They're going to go on our inside pole right here, which is going to be the one that lays down on the ice. So wait with that one for right now. We're actually going to wait until we install the fabric to connect this to the hub assembly. Just like that. We're now ready to put the fabric insulated skin over the top of our shelter. And what we're going to do first is we're going to thread, we're actually going to lay the skin, the fabric out on the floor, basically upside down. And we're going to find where our zippered door is, right here. And right below the door, there's a little sleeve. And what we're going to do, that sleeve, we're going to thread our last tube here into that sleeve and attach it to our pole hub. Now the skin will be attached to our shelter. What we can do from there is actually take it and flip it over, and then we'll go back inside, extend all the poles, and attach the rest of the poles to the inside of the skin. Okay, so now we have our skin basically draped over our initial frame. And what I like to do is come around in the back here with it set up and attach just a couple of simple clamps to clamp the fabric onto the sled. There is a trim piece that's going to be installed later, but this is just temporarily for right now, just to hold it in place. Then what we'll do is we'll go inside and we will install our cross braces. The great thing with the Eskimo FlipMo2 is that the cross braces are actually permanently attached to our poles. And so when they're deployed, they're right in place, right where we need them. And when it's time to stow it away, they attach neatly to the pole and fold up right with the shelter. No more digging in the bottom of the tub, no more losing those pieces. They're right there, they're right handy where we need them, when we need them. The final step in assembling the FlipMo2 is to pull the skin tight and attach this trim piece along the bottom so that that skin is held right where it needs to be. What I like to do is find the center pole on the inside and make sure that that is in the hole in the tub. Once that's lined up, pull the fabric tight. We want it fairly tight. We don't want it too tight, but we want it so it's going to be fairly taut. And pull it tight. I like to hold it in place with a couple of clamps. Find that center point where the hole and the center pole is, and start by sliding that trim piece up over the edge of the tub. It's a little bit tough to get started. Once we get it going, we'll be in good shape. There we go. With a hammer, just go ahead and tap it on. Then work yourself around using the lines as a guide and tap it on all the way around, keeping the fabric tight. Once we're done, we'll go ahead and take the screws that came with the kit and we'll screw this piece of trim in place, and that'll be it. And there we have it. We're done with our FlipMo2 Inferno. We're ready to take it out on the ice. Everything has been installed, everything's been put together, and excited to get it out on the ice and give it a real test. Thank you. Well, we're ready to go here. We've got the FlipMo2 Inferno all packed up. We've got the Lake Runner all set to go. And I just wanted to share with you a couple little additions I've added to customize my rig. I've included an XL side packer large trunk, and that attaches to the back of the Lake Runner with the XL receiver hitch mount. And it mounts right on the back. It's a nice sturdy trunk, waterproof, snowproof trunk. It is lockable and plenty of room in here for a couple of flashers, maybe a few extra propane cylinders, 1-pounders, and maybe some tools. Lots of combinations and lots of possibilities, but great way to add some extra storage in addition to the storage we have inside the tub on the FlipMo2. Here we have one of the other additions from Excel Outdoors. This is a fish cleaning station. As you can see, it bolts right into the same receiver hitch attachment that we have on our Lake Runner utility hauler. Great addition, and you can stow this fish cleaning board inside of your shelter in the tub when you're not using it. Bring it on out, set it up. You've got plenty of area here to clean your fillets out on the ice or back at the landing before you head out for the day. Great little addition, a nice little handy tool.